What's up, Wolves fans? Welcome to another edition of the Wolves Wired podcast. I'm your host, Chetan Kohli, and today I got a really special episode for you all today. So right now, we're in the midst of an absolutely epic Western Conference Finals between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. And to help us break down every twist and turn of this series, I'm thrilled to welcome a very special guest to the show, Prabhat. Prabhat is a former Dallas Mavs media member and photographer with a wealth of knowledge and experience covering the game at the highest level. His insights and expertise are going to be invaluable as we deep dive into key matchups in this series and different strategic adjustments that could ultimately decide who advances to the NBA Finals. So thank you, Prabhat, for taking the time to join me today on this episode. And before we jump into the action, it would be an honor to hear from you about your experiences while you worked for the Mavs.
Yeah, dude, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Like I was saying before, it's been a minute since I've gotten to do something like this. So, yeah, I'm excited. And a great series, obviously, so it should be fun to talk about it. But, yeah, just quickly, like my background. I did like 2 or 3 years with the Mavs, got to do media reporting. I was writing at first, but then I kind of transitioned to video and photography and kind of press conferences, asking them questions at the practices. So you kind of get to see like on an eye to eye level, like the difference between these dudes and the average basketball player. You see like the intricacies of how their offenses run, like how an NBA practice is, kind of discoursed, and it's really interesting to see. So yeah, I think it'll be a really good discussion, and yeah, we can get into it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So now that I've set the stage and introduced the expert analysis that we'll be getting from Prabhat, I just kind of want to dive right into it. So Prabhat, I want to start by getting your overall impressions of how this series has unfolded so far, and what specific adjustments or strategies do you think the Mavs employed which allowed them to steal both games on the road in Minnesota? And more specifically, was it a matter of just slowing down the Wolves' transition game and limiting their stars like Anthony Edwards and Cat? Or did the Mavs just simply execute better on both ends of the floor?
I think when you like look at this series so far, Ant obviously has not shot well in the first 2 games. Mm-hmm. He's been struggling, especially from 3. I think in the first game, we saw him take a lot of threes just because he was tired out, whether that was from guarding Kyrie, whether it was driving to the hoop early on. But the Mavs have really been clamping down on Anthony Edwards. And I honestly haven't seen so much of a double team kind of game plan towards him, but more so like they're collapsing on him and kind of forcing him, like if he's going to get shot in the paint, it's going to have to be free throws, or he's going to have to kick it out to someone else. Like they're not letting him be the guy that's giving them the edge. And if you look at the first 2 games, I mean, both of these games were so close. And it kind of took Luka and Kyrie playing some of their best games of the playoffs this year. Luka probably his best 2, in my opinion. And then you look at, what Minnesota's doing. Cat hasn't honestly played that great either. He hasn't shot above 50% this series. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if Rudy Gobert has a block this series.
Yeah, he only has 1 block. That's it.
Yeah, I hate the narrative like he's not a good defensive player. You don't just win 4 depoys and not be a good defensive player, of course. But I think it's the other pieces, They're forcing Anthony Edwards to be the playmaker, and which is fine because the games have still been close, but I feel like the Timberwolves just haven't been making the shots that they need to. And if they had been, if, Cat was shooting a little better, if Gobert had a little bit better of an impact defensively, if Conley could get some of his shots to go, it's probably 1-1 Mavs Wolves, or it could even be 2-0 Wolves. So it's small things. And I think the series is a lot closer than people are kind of giving it credit for right now.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying about the 3-pointers, like it was kind of crazy during game 1 because the Wolves, like, I think this is correct. They attempted 49 3-pointers in game 1, and that's the most that they attempted throughout the whole regular season and even in the postseason so far. So I think the Mavs' main goal, like you said, is just kind of clog the paint so Anthony can't get downhill and he can't just finish at the rim as easy as he normally does. And then also you were talking about like making the other role players on the Wolves beat the Mavs. I feel like in game one, Jaden McDaniels, he had a really, really good game. He dropped 21 points. And then in game two, Naz Reid, just that dude could not miss from three. It was like crazy to watch him. I think he went like 7 for 8 or something like that. So I think that even if you get a little bit of a small contribution, even from just Ant, I feel like he just needs to attack the basket a little bit more because they were giving him some foul calls throughout the second game. But then, like you said, I feel like he's just getting really tired because he has to chase around one of the best players in the league and one of the best like playoff performers in Kyrie. So that was like exactly what you said is exactly what my thoughts have been so far. And then moving on, how much of an X factor do you think Kyrie has been for Dallas? Because we know his playoff experience and his clutch shot making ability, and it's well documented throughout his past playoff and finals runs. But what do you think has allowed Kyrie to be more aggressive as a scorer throughout this series as compared to how he played against the Thunder? Because against the Thunder, we saw Kyrie take on a role of more of like a playmaker, but in these games, we saw him come out and look to score first. So what do you think kind of helped him change that part of his game?
Yeah, not to give like the cliche answer, but like the experience. I saw a graphic the other day, and like, Kyrie is one of the oldest star players. Or he probably is the oldest star player remaining in the playoffs right now. And so he's been in the playoffs plenty of times. He got to play against arguably the best ever in LeBron. And so that experience, like, as well as I thought the Thunder played, as well as I think the Timberwolves honestly have been playing, they just haven't been getting that production from their superstars, their stars. And I think that's been the difference. But I think Kyrie's just kind of understanding of the playoffs. Like, he knows like what the team needs, and it's been successful. Like, he's just playing the role of what the team needs. And the Mavs have a system where, Luka is like a prolific first quarter scorer. And it's kind of, he gets going early, like he's going to be going the whole game. And so that allows Kyrie kind of to focus on playing defense. And you still got to account for him. So just even having him on the floor from the standpoint of like being the veteran on the team, and also just being a guy that you cannot leave because he's too good. He'll make his shots. He's going to take advantage of it, which is what he did game one. It's more than just an incredible scoring ability alongside Luka. It's the playoff experience. It's knowing how to take advantage of what the defense has given him. And he's been lights out this playoffs. He had 9 points in a game last series against the Thunder, and people were like kind of clowning him for it, but they didn't realize he had 11 assists too, and that he played great defense all night. And so I think that's just kind of what, maybe not the role that people would have expected Kyrie to come in and kind of shine in, but I think he's been here before. He knows how to get it done. He knows how to win. And so the time, like, when the time comes for Kyrie to be aggressive, like he saw in game one, it's been effective. So I think he's just taking his chances. And when you have a player like that on your team that just knows to make the right play, give his energy to the right parts of the game, that's dangerous because he's always going to be a threat. He's always going to be there. And so I think that, just having him out there is a huge boost for him. And that experience you can never kind of undervalue that. And I'm glad he's on my team.
Yeah. Like you mentioned how like he's been a lot better defensively throughout these playoffs too. And I think that a lot of people should give him a lot more credit for the defense that he's been playing because he's had to guard some very hard players. Like against the Thunder, he was matched up against Jalen Williams a lot of times throughout the series, and Jalen Williams is a lot taller than him and also a lot bigger than him. So he really held his own in that end. And then even in this series, there's times where you see, I know that Derrick Jones Jr. is usually the primary defender on Ant, but you see Kyrie get switched on to Anthony Edwards a lot, and Ant just hasn't been able to blow by him like he normally does against smaller guards. And that's like a huge prop to Kyrie's, like, he kind of went into the mindset and he kind of told himself that if I need this team to win, I kind of have to step up defensively. So I feel like, just like you said, the playoff experience and kind of knowing what he has to do to get the job done, if that means him taking a seat back to Luka and allowing Luka to score and him do everything else, I feel like that just kind of plays a part in the Mavs. Just everyone is clicking right now. And
Yeah,
you made some really
yeah,
excellent points about the impact of Kyrie, but yeah.
yeah. I'd like to like add on to that. Like, I like when we were talking about the Timberwolves, you know, like why these games have been so close. If you look at the difference, like in my opinion, I feel like the difference hasn't even been like so much that Anthony Edwards isn't playing great or Karl Anthony Towns is playing great. Like you look at the Mavs, like it's not always the case of both Kyrie and Luka are going off for 30. They did that game one, and that was, you know, that's hard to stop. But if you still look at like the Mavs holistically, they're playing great as a unit. Like everybody is still doing a great job playing their role, like making their shots. They as a team are shooting well. And you mentioned like Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, like they lit it up, but they need all of those guys to do that. And I think that's the role that Ant and, you know, Ant should really be looking at. Like if I can't find an efficient way, a guaranteed way to get to my spots, get my shots, then it's time to make sure that these guys, the rest of these guys are involved. Because that's the identity of a good playoff team. And I think all of these teams that we have in the playoffs right now are complete. They didn't get there just because of their superstars. And so, you know, Kyrie being able to get those other guys involved has been huge.
And those other guys for the Mavs have been PJ Washington. Like he was going crazy from 3 during the Thunder series. But in the Wolves series, it's, in my opinion, it's been the impact of Derek Lively, especially because Derek Lively has been playing amazing. He's been just doing really well defensively, grabbing defensive rebounds, not allowing the Wolves to have extra possessions in different setups in the half court. And also just as a lob threat for Luka and Kyrie in the pick and roll, he's been super amazing. So what are your thoughts of Derek Lively so far, especially as such a young player and this being his first time in the playoffs as a rookie?
Yeah, I remember when they when they drafted Derek Lively. Actually, I was in the room, in the media room. We didn't get to see him because they had to fly him in, and I was gone by then. But I remember the reaction in the room, and the reaction was like, "Really, Derek Lively? Like what?" And you know, look at where we are now. Like this guy's like, in my opinion, right now probably the best offensive rebounder remaining in the playoffs. I think Gobert, when he's on his game, is definitely the best, but I haven't seen that. You know, I haven't seen Gobert imposing his will on in my opinion, you know, like when the Mavs are a great rebounding team, but you know, Rudy Gobert still has size on both of those guys, experience. I think he needs to be a little more active on the glass because Lively has just been killing pretty much everybody that he's played this playoffs on the glass offensively. He's not getting enough credit, and you know, he was a positive plus minus in game 1 and game 2. He's been and you know, he had 10 rebounds in game 1 and he had 9 in game 2. He's playing great defense. He's a lob threat. Like, you know, that's what Gobert, I think, needs. I think Gobert needs to be producing at the level Lively is right now. And I keep going back to, like, I feel like the series is so close. It's just a matter of 1 or 2 role players being on their game versus, you know, that's what the playoffs are about. It's not always about the stars. And I just feel like the Mavs are doing a better job of utilizing those guys on their bench.
And then I also, moving on from that, I kind of have to ask your thoughts on, we witnessed probably one of the most iconic moments of the series so far in game 2, where Luka hit a cold-blooded game winner over Gobert in game 2, because we were just talking about Gobert a lot, and especially talking about his defense. So that shot was obviously like an absolute dagger to the heart of Wolves fans, especially me. I may have shed a tear or two after that shot because I thought we had that game in the bag. But with the game tied, and I think there was like approximately like 5 or 6 seconds left on the clock, Luka switched onto Gobert off a pick and roll, and he just did a series of dribble moves, and he had just a very small amount of space, and he just calmly drained a fadeaway three-pointer right in Gobert's face. And that shot was like, it's a high degree of difficulty for a shot like that. And especially for a superstar like Luka, it just he kind of makes it seem like it's another day in the office for him. So I want you to just kind of, from your perspective, take us inside that play from both an offensive standpoint from Luka and then a defensive standpoint from the Wolves. Like, what made Luka's shot so unguardable, even when you have an elite 4-time defensive player of the year, Gobert, switch onto you?
Yeah. So I think one thing, what they honestly should, if you remember 2 years ago, Luka hit the same exact shot on Gobert in Utah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He hit, and the thing is, no one remembers it because Utah won that game. Somehow, with 40 seconds left, they were down 4 and they were still able to get the win. But Luka hit that same kind of dagger shot. Obviously, there was a little less time. But if I'm Minnesota, like, you've got to get someone else to take that shot. Like, I think Gobert's depoy status isn't because of his perimeter defense. Like, he's an inside threat. And honestly, the switch, I think, was the biggest mistake. Like, I don't think Jaden McDaniels should have allowed Gobert to take that matchup. McDaniels needs to come up and because at that point, what's Luka going to do? He's going to pass it to Derek Lively. And then, because they're going to, if they trap him, because if they're going to trap him, they're not going to let him drive the lane. That's when he's at his most dangerous. So they'll trap him. At that point, it's on Derek Lively and someone else to make a play. Luka's step back is, like, statistically, going left is statistically one of the most efficient shots in the NBA over the last couple of years. Yeah. Like, I think he shoots like almost, I wish I had the stat with me. I think he shoots like 39 point something percent on step backs going left. 40, yeah, and he's even better in the clutch. He did it game 1 on Ant too. Like, the Timberwolves know, the league knows. Yeah, that's a shot he can make. So if I was the Timberwolves, I was surprised that was the first time pretty much all game that they didn't trap Luka and they let him go one-on-one. And, that's your depoy, so you kind of want to trust him. But, you've also got to know your personnel. There's guys better equipped for that. Just because Gobert is the depoy doesn't mean he's the best matchup for, arguably one of the best perimeter players in the NBA. And you just have to force that ball out of his hands and get someone else to make a play, because he's shown 4, 5, 6 times now that he's going to make that shot in the playoffs. He's done it multiple times. So, it was a crazy moment when he made it.
Yeah, I know. It was actually I saw it happen as soon as Gobert switched on him. I was like, oh, this might be it. This might be the dagger, because there was a clip that I saw on I think Bleacher Report tweeted it out. You can see Jaden's face as soon as he switched onto Lively. Jaden was damn, this might be he might make the shot over Rudy. But going back to what you were saying, I felt like what were you saying?
No. I was just gonna add, I feel like, I don't know if Finch was calling it out, because I think that's his identity. He's a defensive oriented coach, and that's what makes the Timberwolves so good. I feel like Finch was standing up. I wasn't sure why someone wasn't screaming send the double, because I don't think anyone would agree that was a favorable matchup for the Timberwolves, right? That was not the matchup you wanted.
Exactly, because even Jaden, especially, he's known to be one of the best. Jaden McDaniels, he's known to be one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. He just made his first all defensive team this year. So I feel like the best thing the Wolves could have done in that situation is just forget about the switch, trap Luka, and then force him to make a pass under pressure with 5 seconds left. And then who knows, maybe that pass would get deflected because you have 2 people on him. But worst case comes to worst, you have Lively make a dunk or make a layup and you go into overtime on your home court. So I feel like going into overtime on your home court is kind of rather what you would want than Luka taking one of his most efficient shots. But also, the credit goes to Jason Kidd as well for telling his team to kind of just go out there and go for the win. Because when you're on the road in a close game like that, your whole goal is to steal the win, and that's exactly what they did. So that was really smart of them to not go for the 2 and go for the 3 instead.
Yeah, and
And
just
then,
to add on to that. Oh, sorry. Do you mind if I add on?
no, you go. You got it.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add to that, with like the point in the series it was at, like you knew the Mavs were gonna go for the win. I was talking to my like friends when we were watching the game. I was like, we're going for 3, right? There's no way we're not shooting a 3. You kind of almost had to know that they were gonna go for 3 because they already had game 1. They're gonna feel confident going back games 3 and 4 if they're up 2-0, and so that was. I feel like you almost had to know that was the game plan, like the 3 was going to go up. And if you knew that, the Mavs weren't planning to go for 2, and it could have been a 1-1 series right now. So I just think just have to kind of personnel identify, like it's Luka Doncic. You make anybody else take that shot. You don't let him take that shot. So, I think they'll adjust. It's the Timberwolves. They're a good team. They were down 3-2 last series and they responded, and so I think it should be interesting.
Yeah, and then just looking ahead into the future a little bit, and going to Game 3 today, what do you think the Mavs kind of need to do consistently over these next couple of games to ultimately like close the series out? Do they need to just get contributions from their role players like PJ Washington, like how we saw him play against OKC, or is it just a way to? Or is it just simply come down to Luka and Kyrie just out-dueling Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns in these last 2 closeout games for the Mavs? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think just looking at it from an unbiased standpoint, the Timberwolves top to bottom are a more complete team than the Mavericks. They have, in my opinion, probably a top 3 shooting team in the league. They have they have the 2 best shooting bigs in the league, in my opinion, Naz Reid and Cat. You could argue either one. You could probably argue Cat's the best shooting big in the league, which I think he is. You've got a number of really, really good defenders. You have a Depoy, you have Conley, you have Vanderbilt. You have all these guys. It allows them to switch. There's not really a game plan for Luka, but I think the Timberwolves just need to get back to the identity of like what made them so successful, which is looking for the open shot. You brought up Jaden McDaniels. He was tearing us up that first half of the game, and Anthony Edwards didn't need to do a lot of shooting or scoring, and they were winning by a good amount. And so just like, I think once that opens up, the Mavs are going to be forced to guard those guys. They have to let these other guys, the role players, it can't just be Naz Reid one game, and it can't just be Jared Vanderbilt one game. Sorry, not Jared Vanderbilt. Jaden McDaniels. I'm sorry, Jaden McDaniels. It's got to be.
I miss Jared Vanderbilt, bro.
Yeah. Also a Timberwolf. Yeah, sorry, but it's got to be cohesive, And I think once that happens, I think the Timberwolves playing at their most cohesive, their best team ball, is a bigger threat than the Mavs, because the Mavs don't have the kind of star power, the kind of talent off the bench that the Timberwolves do, and that's going to open it up for Cat and in my opinion, I think Cat is the X factor. If he shoots like how he shot in that Denver series, I think it goes to 7 if Cat can kind of pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah, like a lot of people have been saying throughout the whole playoffs, like Cat he was known to not perform at a very high level in the playoffs previously before this year, but we saw him step it up against Phoenix. We saw him step it up against Denver, and it really, in my opinion, it was his offense. His offense was clicking. He was shooting efficiently. He wasn't dropping like 30 points a game. He might have like 17 points or 20 or something like that, but it's his improvement on the defensive end and he kind of just bought into the mindset that Chris Finch, because the identity of the Wolves is defense. So he kind of just bought into that mindset finally to be a defensive-minded player. So I feel like you said, he is the biggest X factor for the Wolves. If he could just shoot a little bit more efficiently and just play a little smarter. And I don't know if you also see him do this a lot, but I see him he tends to rush when he's in the post, and he tends to just kind of run through people and put his shoulder down. And that's something he kind of needs to fix because he's bigger than almost everyone on the court. Like, he's 7 foot and 240 pounds. So sometimes I just think that he forgets that he's that big. So he just kind of needs to be a little bit more efficient and just take his time. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's allowed, in my opinion, Anthony Edwards to be so successful, because he's, in my opinion, a kind of an underrated playmaker. I've seen him make some pretty incredible passes out of a shot or attacking the basket, and when you do that, like when the Timberwolves are at their best, which is making threes and getting stops, that's hard to beat any team. If you're getting stops and shooting threes at a high percentage, you have to guard up. And that allows guys like Anthony Edwards to attack the lane and get to his mid-range jump shots. And when, it's just a basketball thing. When you're up, you expend, you don't lose. The stamina is a little different, I don't know if it's a mindset thing or whether it's like how the coach's game plan, but you tend to have a second wind, more energy, and that's important. Like, Ant has been exhausted this series. He needs to have the other guys around him. And that's why I say Cat. If Cat can open it up for the Timberwolves, like, it's going to be really hard for the Mavericks to keep up, because you knew the Timberwolves were going to make it hard on the Mavs defensively, and they have been. And I know the Mavs have picked it up defensively, but there's only so much you can do when the Timberwolves are shooting at their best. And when you've got those guys, Ant's going to do his thing. So it really just comes down to Cat taking that step, opening it up, giving the other guys a chance to keep shooting threes. Like, we've seen that they can shoot it. Naz Reid has shot it well. McDaniels has shot it well. These guys are playing well. So these games are so close. Like, they're so close. It could have been 2-0 Wolves. It could have been 1-1. This series could have gone anyway. So game 3 is going to be huge. I think it's going to be it's going to be a banger. I can't wait to see it tonight at 7, 8 Eastern time. They've got so they've just got to stick to their identity. It's like cliche, but that's kind of the Mavs' weaknesses. If you can get the Mavs on a run and limit their offense, it's hard for them to get back into games.
Yeah. And then also another thing that I think the Wolves have is what hurting them the most is, like, especially in game 2, I feel like the Mavs obviously, like, they played really well. They played really well in the clutch, especially Kyrie and Luka hit some really big shots. But I think the Wolves kind of beat themselves in game 2, especially when there was like 5 minutes left, because you saw a lot of turnovers in clutch moments, especially the one that probably comes to your mind is the Anthony Edwards turnover with like 12 seconds left when he still had 6 seconds left on the shot clock. He just kind of threw the ball out of bounds expecting Naz Reid to come towards him. But I just feel like the Wolves, they need to value each possession and protect the ball a lot more. They've been turning it over so much, and they've been turning it over in such close situations that it allows the Mavs to come back and have a chance to close the game out, where instead, in that instance where Ant had the ball, the Wolves could potentially have went up 4 or even 5, and it would have been a lot harder for the Mavs to win that game. So I think, in my opinion, that also comes with some playoff experience, because you could see Ant gets flustered at times when he does have the ball in his hands in late game situations. But do you think his playoff experience plays more into the turnovers that he's been having, or do you think it's just him making like the wrong plays?
I think that he knows he's one of the best players in the league. He knows that he has to be the guy in those moments. And so sometimes, and I feel like Luka does this too, I think sometimes they force themselves to make a play because they don't have the confidence to be like, nah, I can't give the ball up. I need to go make this play. And, these are professional NBA, like, they're planning for it, like, they study, like, it's crazy when you look at the reports for how they guard these guys. Like what they do is like they have like a sheet and they put the tendencies down, like every little
Oh
tendencies,
wow.
like, and it's like divided up into chart. Like if he goes left, take his right hand away, force him baseline. Don't let him go. Like they have very, very specific defensive game, and so they have it down to a T. It's not always going to work because it's great players.
Mhm.
Like they game plan for Luka extensively, for Kyrie extensively, but they're great
Yeah.
players, so it's not going to work. But in those high pressure situations, experience, like, yeah, experience matters. And him trying to make a play, like, that's the difference. Veteran teams, experienced teams will take advantage of those moments. Like, they remember. And it's really cool to see, like, the way they break it down because they know the players' tendencies, they know what they want to do. So that's why I keep going back to, like, and it's a lot bigger for like the stars. Like the stars have a pretty significant section on that scout sheet. They it's in a pretty hefty order, and they have the percentages, everything. So he's gonna get his shots. I expect him to have a huge game 3, game 4, but I think he just needs to get out of the mindset of I have to be the guy and force this shot. Like I have to.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the identity of this team, having Anthony Edwards carry them. That's not how they've been winning games. They've been
Yeah.
arguably the best team defense this playoffs. When they're shooting threes efficiently above 50%, like I don't think they've lost a game this year. You know,
Yeah,
they've
they haven't.
yeah. So or in the playoffs is what I mean. So you get
Yeah.
those other guys going, like Ant's going to find his groove. He's a great player. You just need to see one shot go in, and that's how good these guys are, man. And so like I said, I think he's going to have a huge game 3. I think game 4 is going to be even bigger.
Mhm.
I'm kind of worried for my Mavs tonight, because it's going to be a little different look. I would expect like the Wolves are going to have a very different look tonight, offensively and defensively.
Defensively, yeah.
Um,
They. I feel like that. I feel like Finch is gonna probably like just definitely get on the guys and kind of hound them about just playing Timberwolves basketball. Like Kat says this almost every post game after they lose throughout this playoffs. He's been saying like the reason we've been losing these games is because we drift away from playing the type of basketball we've been playing all year. So I feel like Finch these past like day and a half ever since game 2, he's definitely had a hard film session with all the players, and he's definitely just hounding them on just getting back to how they're used to playing and just playing like a team. But it was kind of interesting for you to bring up like how like how the teams have like a chart with like all the different tendencies and everything like that. I didn't know that. So can you explain more about that? So what goes like on that chart? Is it just kind of like what players like to do and kind of how to like counter what they do? Is that like what's on that game plan?
Yeah, so the sheet is like tendencies. It's tendencies of the players, like
Okay.
where they're most efficient. So, like, if Anthony Edwards is, top of the free throw line, mid range jump shot is one of his most efficient shots. When Anthony Edwards is at the
Mm-hmm.
top of the key, the perimeter, and he screens left, they're not going to let him, um, they're not going to let him isolate to that part. Like they're going to force him towards the baseline. They're going to force him to
Okay.
go to a shot that's not as high percentage. Or, in this case, I don't even think the narrative has been like he's not attacking, which yeah, he shot 12 threes in game
Yeah.
1. Yeah. But
Yeah, it was game
I
one.
still think he is. I still think he's attacking. Honestly, I still think he's been getting after. I just think Derek Lively and Gafford, they know like, okay, if he's not going to shoot that mid range, which I think he's gotten away from completely this series, and I think he needs to go back to.
Yeah.
They know like go contest, and Dallas has been, I think, one of the absolute best in terms of interior defense since they've picked those guys up, and
Mm-hmm.
so the stats like those every team does it, but it's heightened in the
Okay.
playoffs. And when you get 4 games. They change every game. So, like, it's going to change game 1 to game 2 because the players adjust. And great players, you can't do anything. Like, they're going to not, like, guys like LeBron. That's why in, like, 2018, the guy was dropping 40 every. He just adjusted to everything. That's going to come in time for Ant. And, you know, I'm sure these, like you said, Finch has probably dialed up something different for them to maybe it might look different, but I think the game plan is still going to be get back to it. And those sheets, like, you know, the Timberwolves are using them too. They're probably, I wouldn't be surprised if tonight they don't even let Luka take a shot the first quarter. Like, they might double him on every action he's there. Like, they don't want him to. They're going to be like, if you're going to beat us, it has to be the other guys. I would expect that tonight. We'll see if I'm right. But those sheets, they're like, that's kind of like the key to keep, like, they don't want, people are saying Anthony Edwards not shooting mid-range jump shots. It's because the Mavs are not letting him get that shot. They're like, we'd rather have you drive and test our bigs. They're not letting Cat shoot open. Every 3 that Cat is shooting has been pretty well contested. They're up on him. They're treating him like a perimeter player. And so I think that's given more liberty for guys like Naz Reid and McDaniels and all these other guys to get a little more involved. But, you know, I don't know if that answered the question, like, entirely, but, like, those kind of things. Yeah, those kind of things, it's how teams gain an advantage. And when they see a weakness, they're going to attack it. Like, I'll say one more thing. Luka, the players always talk, the Mavs players talk about this. They were, like, talking one day in practice, like, the most annoying thing about Luka. And one of the players goes, if he has a play that he likes and he sees he can exploit, he will run it over and over and over. He's not going to stop doing it because they know. So it's all about tactics and attacking weaknesses in a player's defense, because if they're defensively too, can't shuffle right, can't move laterally right, likes to jump going right, all this stuff. It's crazy. And so, like, it's high level stuff. And so, you know, like you said, Finch is going to make I'm very confident he's going to make some pretty drastic adjustments today.
Yeah, like you were saying about Luka, like how if he does see a play that's like working, he's just gonna keep going to it until he forces the defense to adjust to that. And you saw that in game 2. He saw the Derek Lively pick and roll or the Daniel Gafford pick and roll. It just kept working because the Wolves were playing drop coverage a lot, especially in game 1. So, and he just kept going back to that. So I think that, like you said, he's really good at just finding what's working best for him, and he just keeps doing that, and that forces the defense to make changes and kind of takes them away from what they normally do. And just lastly, do you have any kind of thoughts of what the Mavs should do before for game 3? What do you expect from just the Mavs how do you expect them to come out today?
Shooting threes, lots of threes. Like, they're going to be, that's my prediction. I think that, like, this is where they're at their most dangerous. And I think this is why Jason Kidd or, you know, whoever it was, maybe it was Luka, because he has that liberty. But whenever they were like, yeah, we're going to go for 3, like, they all knew coming out of that timeout, it was going to be a 3-point shot. And now that, you know, he hit it and it was a huge shot, they're not going to take this game like, they're not taking this game like, let's tactically break this. They don't want to be in like a punching match with the Timberwolves, a back and forth. They want to kill it now. So they have that room now to be a little more aggressive, but that's also an opportunity for the Timberwolves, you know, because if you don't make your threes, it lets, you know, the Timberwolves, I don't know if we talked about this, but these are the 2 of the best transition teams in the NBA.
Yep.
Like, like on the break, these guys they have rim runners on both sides. Like, they just get after it. And so if the Mavs can make their threes tonight, which is what I think they're going to do, I think they're going to be hoisting. It's going to be really hard for Minnesota to keep up, especially if they're making them. But if they're missing them, Minnesota can keep it close, I would bet that Minnesota has a really, really good shot of stealing a game 3, which I would hate to see. But,
Yeah.
it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very different look, both sides. Like, we're going to be seeing completely different offenses today, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah.
You know a lot more about the Wolves than I do. How do you expect them to come out tonight?
I expect, like you said this before, I think they're just gonna focus on Luca especially and double him. And I said this that Rudy was playing drop coverage a lot in the pick and roll. I think that they're gonna start blitzing Luca as soon as tip off starts. Like as soon as he gets to his pick and roll, they're gonna show two bodies. And the Wolves, the best part of their defense has when they do double a player, their rotations to get back to shooters have it's been like amazing. Like every player kind of puts the effort in to go and contest 3-pointers that you normally would see like wide open threes, but you have the rotations going around and they're just rotating perfectly. So I feel like that's something that's going to be huge for the Wolves today. They got to get back into just finding the rotations and just finding the players that put in that extra effort. And then for Kyrie, I think they're probably going to try and make him be a little bit more of a playmaker again because for the Thunder, that worked a little bit because that's kind of how they got two of their wins in that series. They forced Kyrie to pass a lot more than take the clutch shots. And Luka and Kyrie are kind of like a 1-2 punch. You have Luka in the first quarter, he does his thing, and then Kyrie throughout the first half, he's been aggressive so far. And then when it comes to the second half, Luka comes in as a closer. So the Wolves are probably going to keep Jaden McDaniels on Luka like they have been doing throughout the series. But at the same time, I don't think I touched on this, but Kyle Anderson, statistically speaking, Kyle Anderson has actually held Luka to it was like the lowest field goal percentage by anyone that has guarded Luka. So that's in the time he's been in the NBA. So I feel like they're going to show Luka a lot more bodies and just different looks by kind of alternating between Jaden and Kyle Anderson. But like I said again, it's not all on Anthony all on Edwards to just go out there and drop 40. Like we all know he can do that, and if he does do that, there's a good chance we win. But it's also on the other players, especially role players like Jaden McDaniels, to kind of hit their open shots because once they do start hitting their open shots, you see the paint's not as clogged as it normally is because that forces PJ Washington to come out and guard Jaden or Gafford to come out and guard Cat because Cat is known to be the best shooting big in the league, but he hasn't really been hitting his shots this series. So as soon as the Mavs see Cat like make 1 or 2 threes in the first quarter, I think that's going to be really important. If Cat can get going in the first quarter, that's going to help Ant a lot more throughout the game because then they're going to have to pull out Gafford and pull out PJ Washington so Ant can fully start to go downhill. So that's going to be something really interesting for me to see. So you have any closing thoughts on the game or the series in general?
Yeah, I don't think this is over. I'd love to see us go up 3-0, but I mean, like, I know that this is like a really good team. It's not a fluke. They beat the defending champs. And like, it was impressive to see that. I think tonight really could go either way. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you checked the money line tonight and it was like plus 102, minus 118. Like, I bet it's neck and neck right now. Tonight's going to be a crazy game. Like we both said, it's they're definitely, the point you made about Cat was so good. Like, they're definitely going to be trying to get him and more involved. He has to be the guy that gets it going. I know Mike Conley has been pretty aggressive, and I came into this thinking about, I was going to say like Mike Conley just needs to be more efficient, but he's really not a scorer. I mean, he can definitely score. We've seen him score, but on this team, his role is to defend, play, make, get Ant and Cat those shots. I think he needs to. I think he needs to assert himself a little bit more as a playmaker and focus less on shooting because I feel like he's been I think he's been pretty aggressive, and I almost want to say he, in a way, kind of shot them out of the game towards the end of game 2. He was missing quite a few shots, so you know,
Yeah.
and can turn up for 20 in a quarter. He can turn up for 20 in
Easily.
the span of 5 minutes. He's that good. So if Conley can kind of just get back to his role as a facilitator and a defender, Cat can kind of impose that threat as being the best shooting big in the league. The rest of the team, it's just going to fall into place. You just got to get back to your identity. If you can see 2 of those things, that's the beauty of basketball. And for the Mavs, it's going to be a different look tonight. I know that for sure. They're going to be running a different offense. They know Minnesota is going to be planning for it. And I think Minnesota is probably anticipating that they're going to come out gunning from 3. So today's going to come down to, in my opinion, shot making and and really if the Wolves can stick to their identity, because this is their game to win, honestly. I think the Wolves have a great shot tonight.
Yeah. And yeah, my closing thoughts on this is basically like I see a lot of people kind of saying the Mavs have it in the bag, and even as a Wolves fan, after seeing that shot in Game 2, you do lose a little bit of confidence, but people tend to forget that the Wolves have been the best road team so far throughout the playoffs. Like during the semifinals, they went into Denver games 1 and 2 and absolutely dominated games 1 and 2. So I fully think that the Wolves, if they do really fully lock in and stick to their game plan and execute at a high level, and more specifically, they really have to focus on not turning the ball over in late game situations if it comes to that. But if they do all of that, I think that getting this win is very possible for them, and then they can carry that momentum into Game 4. But this is obviously probably the biggest game of the series because, as most NBA fans know, that once a team goes down 3-0, there hasn't been a comeback so far in the NBA history. So this is probably the most important game for the Wolves so far in the postseason. But yeah, so I think that's enough looking ahead for now in the series. The real excitement is still to come as this epic battle continues to unfold tonight during Game 3 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So all you listening to Wolves Wired, be sure to stay tuned for more updates throughout the NBA. And once again, big shout out to you, Prabhat, for taking the time out of your day to hop on this episode with me. It was a really fun and interesting conversation to have with you, especially since you have a different perspective of the team and you came in with an unbiased opinion. So it was really interesting and intriguing conversation. And to all you listening to Wolves Wired, until next time, this is your host, Chetan Kohli, signing off.